Will today be the day that Thomas Frank is announced as the next manager and perhaps new messiah of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club? The king is dead. Long live the king. I've been spending all weekend watching clips of Thomas Frank's teams play, watching videos of him in the dressing room before and after Premier League victories, and listening to Brentford ITKs on their thoughts of him as the next Spurs manager. I'll be discussing all of that and a gluttony of Spurs transfer rumours in today's daily Tottenham news. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please, if you're on YouTube, give this video a like and do press subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. But let's get into it. And it's the Daily Mirror who've said that Thomas Frank is to be confirmed as the next Tottenham Hotspur manager this week. And it would not surprise me whatsoever if it were to happen today. There is no reason, as far as I'm concerned, for Daniel Levy not to get this deal done. The reported compensation fee is £10 million. In reality, considering the kind of money you would spend on players, that is nothing as far as I'm concerned. I also think with only 1 year left on Ange Postecoglou's contract, the amount of money we had to pay him off wasn't that much. And we just need to go and do it. And we need to go and get Thomas Frank's backroom team in as well. Some of the other reports are Spurs are prepared to advance in talks with leading candidate Thomas Frank. However, also approached apparently in recent days was Roberto De Zerbi of Marseille, the former Brighton manager. But apparently the Italian head coach rejected it as he wanted to stay at Olympique Marseille. Now, as far as I'm concerned, what I think a lot of the online broadcast reports and newspaper reports are saying is about the kind of managers that Tottenham have reached out to via intermediaries. So I don't think Daniel Levy has spoken to Roberto De Zerbi. That's what I don't think has happened. I think a lot of managers have been kind of reached out to via their agents. Would you be interested potentially, hypothetically, in becoming the next Tottenham Hotspur manager? And I think it's only due diligence to reach out to De Zerbi because he did a great job at Brighton. However, for me, he's too much of a wild card. He's too much of a hothead. There is just something. I'm not the only person to have said this because, like I said, I've been listening to and watching a lot of Spurs content over the last few days. I'm not the only person to have said this, but I think there is something with the Italian managers where just their kind of ability to fly off the handle is not something that I think Daniel Levy really wants to get involved with. Some reports from Miguel Delaney, a reputable journalist, said that back as recently as April, Thomas Frank was liked but not near the top of Tottenham's list. However, now he's close to the job itself, having leapt ahead of many other candidates. For me, that is not a surprise. Having done a little bit of research into Thomas Frank this weekend, and I'll admit it, I think you, any regular watchers will have heard me say he doesn't really. I found him quite underwhelming as a possibility. I didn't like the way that Brentford played very direct against us both home and away this season. However, having done a bit more due diligence and watched a lot of his stuff and things, I do really like his manner. I like the way he talks to players. I like the way he talks about tactics, the way he talks about style, the way he talks about being able to change things up based on what is going on minute by minute during Premier League football matches. And it would be no surprise to me whatsoever if he leapt ahead of all of the other potential candidates based on a presentation he gave, an interview he gave to the board. Because in terms of his personability, if that's even a word, the way he comes across, the way he talks to people, the way he treats people, it's very, very impressive. And for me, it's almost like he's got, a hint of that, what we got from Pochettino, although with better English, in that he was really able to get the most out of his team, make them feel like adults, make them feel appreciated. He really is very good at working on players' self-esteem. I saw a great clip. Dig it out if you haven't seen it. It's after a victory in the Premier League, and the video is of Thomas Frank talking to his players in the dressing room. And he does an amazing thing where he congratulates a number of the players who have hit kind of career milestones. Like, I don't know, one of them was, I think, 200 appearances for Brentford. And he talks about some of these players who have played today. And then he brings in Ben Mee, who didn't get on the pitch that day. But he makes a point of telling Ben Mee how impressed he was with his professionalism on that day, despite him not playing, and how he really valued the fact that Ben Mee was helping some of the players through the game on the pitch with some of his shouting from the sidelines, how he discussed the match with them at half-time. And Thomas Frank said to him that did not go unnoticed. and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure Big Ange had stuff like that in his locker as well. But Thomas Frank is not quite as spiky as Big Ange, and I think we'll appreciate what we hear from Thomas Frank in press conferences probably and post-match interviews probably a lot more, because he's a lot more considered, he's a lot calmer, he doesn't seem quite as reactive as Big Ange. I don't think we're going to be seeing Thomas Frank cupping his ear to the crowd or having a go at, dare I say it, having a go at post-match interviewers. And one thing I will say about Ange, who I loved, as you know, but he came across not ideally when talking particularly to female interviewers after the games. He kind of was quite condescending towards them, in my opinion. I don't think we'll see any of that from Thomas Frank. And then the other thing that I really love about Thomas Frank, I think he seems genuinely excited about getting this opportunity. We've had it before with managers like Jose Mourinho and especially Antonio Conte, where it really felt like they were doing us a favour, like they were bigger than the club. Well, from everything I've heard coming out of Thomas Frank's camp, this would be a huge opportunity for him that he would be incredibly excited to get involved with. He was, of course, also on Man United's list last year before they decided to stick with Erik ten Hag and then get Ruben Amorim in mid-season. But he is excited about coming to Spurs. And a report from one of the former members of his staff, Brian Reamer, says this: Tottenham has always been my favourite club. At Brentford, when they were working there together, we always joked that if we were going to move on from Brentford, it would be for Tottenham. It's a club that has had some challenges over the past season, and there's quite a bit of work ahead of them. But Thomas deserves that chance. He's done a fantastic job. Now that is music to my ears. We've got a young, exciting, talented manager who has done his apprenticeship in the Premier League with a club like Brentford, who, let's face it, Brentford, when they came up, they will have been expected to be, at best, a yo-yo club, bouncing up and down between the Championship and the Premier League. But no, Thomas Frank, straight away on coming up, said, we're not going to play this exciting, attractive football that we played in the Championship, because if we try and do that with the players we've got and the budget that we have, we will immediately get relegated. So he played it a bit more direct. He used Ivan Toney, Brian Mbeumo, since that Visser as well is a very exciting forward player, Sharda, and they've played in different ways depending on who they are playing against. And during his time at Brentford, Thomas Frank has had incredible results against some of the biggest clubs. They've beaten Arsenal, they've beaten Man City, they've beaten Manchester United, they've beaten Spurs, amongst many others. I think they've even turned over Liverpool once. And that is something I have to say, although Big Ange got some great results against the likes of Man City away and at Old Trafford, he did not turn Arsenal over. And what Thomas Frank needs to do is get a great result in a North London derby pretty early on. Let me know how you feel in the comments about Thomas Frank being our new manager. But like I said, I like to think of myself as a glass half full Spurs fan anyway, so maybe it's not a surprise that I've done a lot of due diligence, done a lot of research, and I actually like this option at the moment. But let me know if you disagree. It's subjective, and let's talk about it in the comments. There have also been some other managerial rumours still doing the rounds, as well as the De Zerbi one. Some ITK reports, which maybe should be taken with a pinch of salt, but some came out this weekend that Maurizio Pochettino has had conversations with the United States Soccer Federation around allowing him to have a formal conversation with Tottenham, plus a request to compromise on the release clause. The release clause has been described, as in the American men's national team release clause, if any club wanted to get Maurizio Pochettino out of there, it has been described as one of the biggest compensation numbers in the history of men's football. Levy's interest, according to this ITK, in a Poch return is strong. There's a strong feeling across the committee that Poch could maximise the potential within the Tottenham Hotspur squad. Not only that, he would be given the funds he so richly deserved in his first tenure to build something special. However, since those reports came out kind of towards the beginning of the weekend, Maurizio Pochettino has poured cold water on it. He came out with some quotes today. I'm recording this late on Sunday, where he said, I think you realise it's unrealistic for me to return to Spurs at this stage, because he is doing a job for the American men's national team, who of course are hosting the World Cup in a year's time. Pochettino did lose his 5th game as America manager to Turkey, which did make me wonder, is there a chance the Americans would be happy to see him go and get somebody else in? But no, I don't think that is likely to happen. There was also a report over the weekend from Portugal that Marco Silva was apparently very close to taking over as Tottenham manager. Now, for me, this is another example of probably Marco Silva's people saying, we were approached by Tottenham, and he would be interested. The report said an agreement between the parties was very close to being finalised, and everything leads us to believe that the Portuguese manager will succeed Ange Postecoglou. With a contract valid until 2026 at Fulham, Silva will continue his career in London, and in 25-26 he'll have the additional challenge of managing Spurs in the Champions League. Tottenham would be the 5th English team managed by Marco Silva after Hull, Watford, Everton and Fulham. Now, for me, I think personally, again, this is an example of Spurs probably having spoken to them, having asked what kind of money they would want, having asked their interest, and got positive responses back. However, all the reports are that Thomas Frank has, as I said, jumped right to the top of that list. For me, Marco Silva has done a great job at Fulham, no doubt. But for me, Silva comes, again, with a little bit of a kind of negative vibe about him. Like, he's undoubtedly a good manager, and he's certainly done a good job at Fulham in terms of getting players who were bought relatively cheaply, who maybe had failed at other clubs. I'm thinking particularly of Alex Iwobi, or, Willian didn't fail at Chelsea or Arsenal, but he was an ageing player, and Silva has really done a good job getting the most out of those kinds of players at Fulham. But at Tottenham, I think at this stage what we need is someone positive again, someone uplifting, someone who is hungry for this opportunity, who hasn't had a chance maybe at a big club as yet, whereas Marco Silva did work at Everton, and they are a traditionally big club, I'm sorry. And for me, it just would not excite me in the way that Thomas Frank now does, with me having done some due diligence. There was also a report from Sammy Merkbell over the weekend in the BBC that it was understood that consideration at Tottenham was given to the prospect of making an unlikely move for Newcastle's Eddie Howe. This was towards the back end of the season, but Newcastle qualifying for the Champions League nipped that in the bud. All right, guys. Obviously, I did do my live stream when it was announced that Ange Postecoglou was sacked. That was late on Friday afternoon. But since then, a number of reports have been released around more information coming about Ange Postecoglou's exit. So let's talk about that. His departure has angered a number of Spurs players, with sources claiming that some want to leave the club and that the Australian successor will face a huge task to repair the dressing room damage. Now, Ange was close to a lot of the players, and I don't doubt that. However, I think, and I did mention this in the live stream on Friday, I think footballers are, they're pretty pragmatic, they're pretty quick to change, and the reality is, the most important thing for them will be, the majority of them, will I be fancied by this new manager? Will I get my place in the first team? And when it comes to pre-season and the dust settling on Ange's departure, I'm sure once they meet Thomas Frank and once he talks to them and tells them what plans he has for them in the first team and in the squad, I think they will all work for him. I think they'll all like him. I have talked before about a little bit of a worry I have about whether Thomas Frank has the experience and the nous to impress those players enough, those players with big egos, particularly the likes of maybe a Christian Romero, and that will realistically remain to be seen. Romero may well have made up his mind that he wants to leave, and if that's the case, and if Atletico Madrid or Real Madrid come in with the kind of money that it would take for Daniel Levy to accept that bid, then Romero can go off with our blessings, I think, because he has won the Europa League at Tottenham Hotspur. But is there a chance that Thomas Frank comes in and says, Christian, I want you to stay one more year at least, and I want to make you my captain? Because I've said it before, and not everyone agrees with this, and that's fine. Let me know how you feel in the comments, but I think offering Christian Romero the armband is the kind of thing that could inspire him to want to play in every game, to want to take this club by the scruff of the neck. And in reality, although he loved the attacking football of Ange Ball, he will get a lot more protection under Thomas Frank. And the reality is defenders love to keep clean sheets. He'll get more protection, but he will still have the opportunity to play those midfield splitting brilliant passes that he does. No, Thomas Frank is not going to try and take that away from Christian Romero. So I do wonder whether there's a possibility that Frank could, just incentivize Christian Romero to stay a bit longer. Another source said the Tottenham players are so angry about what has happened and how it has been handled, the next manager is going to inherit a difficult situation. That may well be the case, but I back Thomas Frank to get the best out of them. Ange has left alongside some of his trusted lieutenants, Mile Jedinak, Nick Montgomery and Sergio Raimundo have also left Tottenham Hotspur, but Matt Wells and the goalkeeping coach Rob Birch are staying, and it remains to be seen whether they will continue in their roles once a new appointment, expected to be Thomas Frank, is sorted out. Now, Sami Merkbell also, in his very good article about all things Ange leaving Spurs, he said that multiple sources have told BBC Sport that the club's injury record has been at the centre of some friction between members of the coaching team and the medical and strength and conditioning staff over the course of the season. There are apparently examples of the medical staff not seeing eye to eye with Ange Postecoglou and his staff. None of that surprises me. And again, like a broken record, guys, I'll caveat this once again. I did think Ange deserved the opportunity to show that he could change it next season. However, as I've been saying during watch-alongs and post-match reviews all season, if Ange loses his job, it will be because of the injuries, and it will be because we conceded the same goal time and time again. And I think the reality is that whereas in Australian football or Japanese football or Scottish football, he was managing teams who were so much better than their peers, their opposition in those leagues, he could deal with a few injuries here or there. But at Spurs, in the Premier League, where every game is an absolute battle, is a challenge, we could not afford to have so many players have muscle injuries so regularly. And of course, on top of those muscle injuries, you then get the normal kind of accidental injuries as well, which we suffered, an ACL for Dragishin. Now the knee injury for Dejan Kulusevski's had a few injuries. So it just was the case, in my opinion, and this Sami Merkbell article kind of alludes to it as well, that the intensity of his training methods and the intensity of how he insisted they played on the pitch. And let's face it, Tottenham under Ange, whenever we got a free kick, there was no resting. He didn't have it. He wanted you to take it very quickly. He wanted you to try and outrun and out-fitness the opposition. And the reality is that the opposition were not doing the same thing the most of the time. And as a result, they were getting more rest time. And as a result, they weren't getting as many injuries. And as a result, a lot of the time, the 11, especially this season, the 11 players that we were playing against for the opposition were stronger than the 11 that Tottenham were able to put up. In The Athletic, they said the following, that rival managers, and this is something I've been saying as well in terms of analysts and opposition managers, they said that rival managers sensed a vulnerability in Spurs. And the quote was, an anonymous quote, "You can see what their ideas are very clearly," said a coach at a rival Premier League club who wished to remain anonymous, as I said. "They play with a lot of players in their front line. They're good at the high press where they score a lot of goals. But when their fullbacks are both up, leaving big spaces down the sides, you can kill them." And I'll bring this back to what I said about Thomas Frank when he was manager of Brentford, playing direct against us, both home and away. That is what they were trying to do. Just get that diagonal ball over the back of our fullbacks. And we suffered from that a lot this season. Maybe not in those two games, but we really did. Either one diagonal would kill us or just one ball through the centre of the pitch. And under Thomas Frank, I'm confident that that will change. And that as it was back in the Conte days, because actually when Conte left, he was basically in fourth in the league, but also back to the Pochettino days. We never, in my recollection of it, and let me know in the comments if you think I'm wrong, but we never just conceded the same goal time and time again. We were never easy to cut open in the same way. And quite often, when you're playing in Premier League matches, quite often the opposition are good enough where they will tear you apart and they will score a brilliant goal, and there's nothing you can do about that. And that will continue to happen. But when you're conceding the same easy goals time and time again, and then the odd brilliant goal here or there, you're up shit creek without a paddle. You're doomed. And that's what was happening at Tottenham. In fairness to Ange Postecoglou, this is a good quote. It's not a quote, sorry, a good report. It was said that his biggest concern when he learned that he was going to lose his job was his staff. He'd been at pains to make sure that they would be looked after, which shows the quality of the man. And like I said, I love Big Ange. And I will say this about Big Ange Postecoglou. And I've already noticed that a lot of Australian fans of Ange and of Tottenham Hotspur as a result of Ange, and subscribers of mine, they've already started unsubscribing, and that's totally fair enough. But one thing that I want to say is that I love Ange, and I expect Ange Postecoglou to turn up next at a big, big club. I expect it to be a big European club, the likes of an Ajax, the likes maybe of a Galatasaray or a Benfica or a Sporting Lisbon, somewhere like that. And I expect him to do an amazing job. And I will follow that team closely. That is how much time I have for Ange Postecoglou. And I think he will do a brilliant job at one of those big teams in a kind of less reputable league than the Premier League, but somewhere where he's at one of the biggest clubs who are expected to win every week, and his style of play will suit that kind of club, just like it did at Celtic. And I expect him to win doubles and trebles and, kind of more importantly, to get back in the Champions League, and he will cause people trouble in the Champions League with those kind of clubs with technical players. All right, guys, before I go into some of the many bits of Tottenham transfer talk, please, if you haven't already, do press like on this video. The more likes we get, the more Tottenham fans will see this in their suggested videos on YouTube. And also, if you're not a subscriber already to my channel, please do subscribe for daily Tottenham news and Tottenham transfer talk, as well as daily Premier League transfer talk across other clubs whilst we get more into the transfer window. All right, guys. Actually, just one more piece of news before I go into the transfer rumours. Sorry, there is some more takeover talk as well. Apparently, Spurs are edging closer to agreeing a deal to sell a stake in the club that would value Spurs at over £5 billion. We've been in talks with consortiums for over a year, and progress is believed to have been made. That rings true with some of the ITK reports I've heard from behind the scenes that some people expect a takeover. Or a semi-takeover of some investment in the club to come through towards the beginning of the new Premier League season. Okay, Fabrizio Romano has announced this weekend that there have been conversations between Saudi clubs and Son Heung-min's agents in recent weeks. Also, Heung-min Son left some teammates and staff with the impression when he left Spurs for the summer that he might well be leaving Tottenham. How do you feel about that? I've said it before, I'll stick to it, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Thomas Frank maybe would be willing to dispense of Son Heung-min if we could get some money in for him, maybe 50, 60, 70 million pounds from Saudi Arabia. I think Daniel Levy would be able to get some good money for him because he'd be able to say, listen, he will become a huge face of Saudi Arabian football. And if we were able to get good money for him, that would be great. If not, if they were only willing to bid, 30, 40 million pounds. And I should say, by the way, tonight, Victor Osimhen has rejected moves to Saudi Arabia. So that might be another added possibility for Sonny to go there if they're going to switch from Osimhen to another face that they're looking to bring in for the PR element of it. But maybe if we don't get the money, if we only get offered 30, 35 million, then Thomas Frank might say, no, I want him. He'd be an excellent squad player, and I think I might be able to get the best out of him. I don't think Sonny's finished, personally. A lot of people say they think his legs have gone. I don't agree. I don't think he's finished at all. I think he could still do great work for Tottenham Hotspur. Some reports this weekend that Spurs have joined the summer battle for Leipzig attacking midfielder Xavi Simons. Excellent player. Chelsea, of course, also interested. Spurs apparently have also made a move for Brighton and Hove Albion forward João Pedro. Really exciting player, João Pedro. Can go inside or out from wide forward. Has got a little bit of a disciplinary problem about him. Doesn't mind a sending off, but he is an exciting player. Also, Bayern Munich number 6, ex-Fulham player João Paulinho. He is not being guaranteed minutes next season, so Tottenham are interested in him again. He was on their list when he was back at Fulham. Spurs apparently also interested in signing PSV's Johan Bakayoko this summer. 22-year-old Belgian international being tracked by a number of Premier League clubs, but that to me suits Tottenham's transfer strategy, which I think in the most part will remain the same. Young, exciting talent that scores highly on the data side of things for Johan Lang. Johan Lang is also, of course, Danish and has a good relationship with Thomas Frank, so that can only help us. Some reports tonight that Spurs have inquired about Roma defender Evan Ndicka. Some other reports saying that's not necessarily the truth, but expect us to be linked with many more centre-backs as the Christian Romero rumours heat up. Villarreal also are ready to rival Inter Milan and Spurs apparently for the signature of Genoa defender Coni de Winter. Spurs have reportedly already made an offer for the 22-year-old. Note, again, another 22-year-old. Spurs, apparently, according to Plettigol, reputable German journalist, have entered the race for Copenhagen wonderkid Victor Froholt. Eintracht Frankfurt are also pursuing him, and Leverkusen have him on their shortlist. He looks like an exciting Scandinavian player. Do not be surprised if we bring in more Scandinavians like Lucas Bergvall. Now we have a bit of a Danish mafia looking like it's going to be at the top of the club. Man United have joined Newcastle, Forest and Spurs, as well as West Ham in the race to sign Dominic Calvert-Lewin as a free agent. Now, a month or so ago, I suggested I didn't think Dominic Calvert-Lewin would be a bad backup on a free transfer to Dominic Solanke. I got a bit of heat from you guys in the comments, but I think potentially he could be a good option on a free. Obviously, a lot would depend on whether he can stay fit enough. He certainly hasn't done for Everton, but when he is fit, he is a handful. England under-21 star Hayden Hackney of Middlesbrough is also on Tottenham's transfer radar. 22 years old, again, looks set to leave his boyhood club after they failed to win promotion to the Premier League. Porto had a bid of £9 million for him rejected in January. Stuttgart are also keen, as a Crystal Palace, but Spurs' scouts have been running the rule over him all season, apparently. And Middlesbrough apparently not in any rush to sell him and could try and squeeze a couple of more million onto his price tag, depending on how he performs at the England under-21s European Championships. Some potential sale news. Fenerbahce apparently close to signing Yves Bissouma. They're in talks with Spurs and apparently they're at an advanced stage for an initial loan deal with an obligation for permanent transfer. That is a move I could see happening. Yves Bissouma had a great end to his season at Spurs, did bits for us in those knockout stages when we had our midfield injured, but I think Thomas Frank particularly will be looking for a midfielder who can be more consistent. He also likes power in his midfield, physicality, and Bissouma doesn't really offer that. Let's hope we can get maybe £30 million for him, £25-30 million. That would be good, something we could reinvest. Atletico Madrid have reached an agreement for Johnny Cardoso. That rules out his move from Real Betis to Spurs. According to Tom Barkley, another reputable journalist, Spurs apparently are minded to bring Manor Solomon back into the first team setup in pre-season. Give him a chance to potentially stake a claim for a first team berth. And Spurs, in a bit of a surprising move, considering we don't have a manager, have exercised their option to extend Ben Davies' contract. In fact, they said on their website they're delighted to announce it, which will now run until the summer of 2026. There were reports he was in talks to sign for Wrexham. I do wonder whether that is Tottenham kind of trying to get some money out of Wrexham for the signing of Ben Davies. All right, guys, before I leave, just some quotes from some of the players. Lucas Bergvall was asked about the Europa League final. He said at first it was really frustrating and disappointing knowing I wouldn't be part of it. He also was asked about his injury. He says, I'm getting better every day. I'm still training and rehabbing at Tottenham Hotspur. And Ben Davies was asked on Welsh international duty about Brennan Johnson. He said, Brennan's shown this year he's a top player and proven a lot of people wrong. And then I will just end on this. Some of the pundits across the broadcast networks, not a huge surprise, but they've been giving their thoughts on Ange's exit. Ramon Vega was particularly scolding of Tottenham. He said, I find it incredibly disrespectful to think about sacking him. He's accomplished the impossible, something others with more significant credentials failed to achieve. Letting him go was one of the biggest mistakes the club have made. And Jamie O'Hara believes Spurs had to sack him. He said it was time for Spurs to move on from Ange. He lost 22 games in the Premier League. The season was a shambles, etc., etc. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this. I will, like I mentioned before, as soon as we get an official announcement on Thomas Frank being appointed as manager of Spurs, I will jump on a live feed with you. So keep an ear out for that and jump on with me and we'll talk about it as that happens, assuming it is going to. Thank you for watching. Do give this video a like on YouTube if you haven't already. Press subscribe if you're not already subscribed to my channel for daily Tottenham news and transfer talk. And enjoy your Monday. Come on, you Spurs.